Mind Your Farm Business on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by RBC Royal Bank.
Welcome to the Mind Your Farm Business podcast brought to you by RBC Royal Bank. I'm Sean Haney, founder of RealAgriculture.com and host of Real Ag Radio on Rural Radio 147 Sirius XM. You can find more episodes of this podcast by going to mindyourfarmbusiness.com. Now, for the farm business owner, there are many, and I mean many, leadership challenges that you face on a daily basis. There are bad days, there's good days, hey, there's even great days as a leader, but the load of responsibility lies on your shoulders no matter which one of these it is. Whether it's at work or home, parenting, leadership takes many turns and honestly with different challenges routinely. Now, back in September, I was fortunate enough to attend a workshop led by Dan Quiggle. Dan captivated the audience during the workshop, hitting on the intertwining of personal, business, and home leadership. This three-legged stool, as I would put it, is exactly what I know all of you deal with every single day. Dan has been speaking to audiences throughout North America for over 12 years. He's a graduate of UCLA and currently serves as president and CEO of America's Choice Title Company, where he is one of the company's founders and is on the board of directors. Now, going back to 1989, Dan was granted the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity of working in President Ronald Reagan's post-election office. In a staff of just a dozen, he was able to gain the unique experience of working closely with one of the greatest men in the 20th century. Dan captivates audiences with his lessons of leadership learned personally from the Gipper. Dan's unique storytelling, it goes beyond motivation by educating on a variety of topics. These include networking techniques, high-performance sales, and marketing, building and maintaining client relationships, and a whole bunch of others. Dan's 42 and has started 3 successful businesses, worked for Ronald Reagan, and worked on Capitol Hill. He's also a national speaker on leadership. He ran for Congress and still finds time for his top priority, which is his family. Enjoy my conversation with Dan Quiggle. Dan, welcome to the Mind Your Farm Business podcast.
Sean, thank you for having me.
Okay, we're going to talk about a number of things today as it applies to leadership and management and really a lot of the things that a CEO is tasked with. Before we get into it, talk about your background.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been a serial entrepreneur kind of my entire life. I started my first company when I was 22. So, I've had to hire and fire just like probably a lot of people that are listening to your podcast. And, you start to see like what works, what doesn't. You start to, listen to friends and people that I meet on the road about what works and what doesn't. And, you start to see a pattern of like what is making people successful in their businesses, in their families, in their communities. And I'm a lifelong learner. So these days I'm speaking a lot to CEOs. And what's fun is that they think I'm there for them. It's a complete opposite. I'm learning the entire time and I love every second of it.
Yeah, right away, that's a takeaway is I think, if you have the attitude around lifelong learning, that's the way to approach it. If you get to a certain age, it's like, listen, I know it all, I've learned it all, I've lost that curiosity. That's a bit of a signal that maybe you're just not as into it as you were before. Do you agree?
Well, so first of all, I love the word you use, curious, right? So I'm actually the power of curiosity. Like every opportunity I've ever had in life is because somebody helped me, and that person helped me because we engaged in a conversation, or I said, where are you headed? Next thing you know, we're vacationing together. We met on a plane or, on the beach or something. So you never know. And so I want to be curious about people around me, about things around me, about companies around me, all of that. But just when I think I'm the smartest one in the room, I want to look in a different room, find somebody better, smarter, hungrier than me, so that I can learn from them. And, and then hopefully I can add value as well. So it's a win-win for everybody.
A lot of times we talk here on the Mind Your Farm Business podcast about, you're talking to CEOs of, running companies of all shapes and sizes, I'm sure. But a lot of times when we hear like CEO, we think of like Fortune 500 and, and yes, there are some differences in some of the pressures that those people are under. But when you get down to it, in terms of some of the experiences and challenges that a CEO goes through, whether you're running a small family business or that Fortune 500 company, there's a lot of similarities in terms of what people go through from a leadership standpoint.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I speak a lot for like Vistage, EO, YPO, and what you start to realize, it doesn't matter whether you're 500 million or 5 million. A lot of the same challenges, a lot of the same opportunities face you, and it doesn't even really matter the industry. It's why somebody can go from Procter and Gamble, and go run GE or go and run Disney or something, because they understand the business fundamentals, the fundamental truths of like what works. I mean, what works is investing in people. It's being a visionary leader. It's handling crisis the right way. It's all these different points that you see along the way. But no, I absolutely think that our vision is of these amazing big giant companies, but there are a lot of family businesses out there struggling, working hard, succeeding, just grinding it out to be successful. And those are the stories that I love to talk about, because no one's talking about them. You always hear about the bad things. You only hear about the bad things CEOs. They've kind of demonized CEOs over the time. What I see philanthropy. I see people caring about the people around them. I see people wanting to solve a big problem or provide a big solution. And it's inspiring to be able to do, see that on a regular basis. It's addicting.
Awesome. So Dan, from your perspective, you talk to a lot of different people, speak to crowds on a weekly basis around the world. How do you define leadership?
Yeah, I think a leader is self-aware. I think they're humble. I think they show like an attitude of gratitude. I think they're visionary leaders. But in the end, to me, a lot of it is about emotional intelligence. It's just understanding that actions have consequences. And when you can empathize with somebody, when you can when you can relate to somebody and they think you relate to them, I think it changes the ball game. And I think that's a powerful part of leadership. And so, there's a lot of different terms you can use, but in the end, I would say emotional intelligence, the ability to understand others and what others are going through, and then to be able to articulate that and create a vision around it, around something exciting. Doesn't even matter the industry. I mean, it can be farming, it can be technology, it can be construction, whatever it is. If you can create a vision so powerful, so compelling that people want to be part of it, where you solve a big problem or you provide a great service, man, it just changes everything.
Define emotional intelligence for the audience so everybody knows what we're talking about.
Yeah, so I think, you can be the smartest one in the room, right? If you can't connect with people, if you talk above them, beneath them, if you belittle them and you don't even know you're belittling them, very hard to be the leader that you need to be successful. So there's 4 types of emotional intelligence. There's self-awareness, social awareness, relationship management, and self-management. And when I speak, I go into each one of those categories and we kind of discuss them. But essentially, just it's about relatability. I mean, if we want to just bottom line it, can you put yourself in their shoes? Can you understand where they're coming from? Can they relate to you? And speaking, Sean, is a lot about that. I mean, speaking is a lot about relatability. I get asked all the time, like, what does it take to be a successful speaker? Well, if you can't relate to somebody, if they can't relate to you, almost impossible to connect, to be successful. Because again, people want to know, like, do you at least know where I'm coming from? Do you know the struggles that I'm going through? Because we're all going through struggles and challenges. But also there's just tons of opportunity staring us all in the face, and fear blocks that sometimes. Fear stops us from taking risk or stepping outside of the norm, or changing up a family business that has been running this way for years and it's been successful. Why are we doing today what we do today? Because mom and dad did it yesterday.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in family business. There's no doubt about that, which a lot of our audience is. Now, in terms of that relating to people, now that could be relating to people in the supply chain that you're working with, or especially when it comes to team members, employees that are working at your company. It's important to be authentic, though, because if you're not authentic in terms of trying to relate to people, it can just totally backfire, and you're actually maybe going backwards instead of forwards.
No, 100%. I mean, come on. All this stems from a level of authenticity, because if you don't have that, it's just game over. Because and you can only fake that for so long too. So that's why you do have to be who you are, but then that may challenge you to kind of step outside what some of the things that you do normally and learn about other people, or open yourself up to their culture or to their struggle or to their journey, and then find places where you can connect in the journey story. So I don't think it's impossible. You don't have to have like to relate to, a multimillionaire. You don't have to have multi-millions, but you may connect through family or through sports, or other ways. But those are the authentic ways you connect.
Yeah. Yeah. I went through your workshop, Dan, about a month ago, and it was absolutely fantastic. So I encourage anybody, if you're looking for somebody to do a workshop on this topic, Dan is your guy. Absolutely. Um, do you think that we celebritize the CEO and what a CEO is or what a leader is? We have sort of like these romantic views on what real leadership is, and is that different than what on the ground really good leaders are doing?
Yeah, no, I think in life, right? Let's look at parenting, for example, right? There's no set book on how do you become a great parent, right? We're all winging it. I mean, essentially. So we do what our parents did really well. We try to double down on that. Hopefully, we try to not do the things that we didn't like that our parents did. But it's kind of the same with leadership, right? I mean, we see people in our lives like good teachers, good coaches, good, bosses, and we kind of take those things that they did really well and hopefully double down on them. And the ones that we don't, we try to avoid as much as possible. So it's not that I think we celebrate or kind of put people up on a pedestal, but I think hopefully we're choosing the traits that we like and we're following those traits. We're emulating them. We're copying them on a regular basis and trying to improve upon them. I mean, I think that's what real leaders do. It's always trying to be the next best version of yourself. And that again applies to parenting. It applies to coaching. It applies to leading in a company. All of these things. And I think we have a humility about that. When you open a vulnerability about that, it also shows to the employees or the family that, hey, I'm not perfect. You know what I mean? I'm going to make mistakes, but my goal here is to learn from those mistakes and always kind of fail forward. And if I fail forward, then I have an opportunity, like I said, to be that next best version. I encourage all of you to do the same.
One of the things you talk about in your workshop is the CEO disease and don't have CEO disease. And I laughed about this and I sort of did a bit of a head scratcher. Like, am I doing this? Oh my God, am I doing this? Did I do this? Oh, I need to change this if I am doing this. What's CEO disease?
Well, just so you know, I appreciate that you self-reflect at that moment because I'm self-reflecting the entire time I'm presenting. You know what I mean? Like I'm like I have the mirror right here, and I'm going, am I practicing what I'm preaching? I'm on a regular basis. So, and sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. So I have to then reevaluate. But no, CEO disease is where you walk out of a room as a leader and you say, they love me. They love me and they think I'm hilarious. And what they're really saying is, look, I'm sick hearing about their trip to a place I'll never be able to afford. I'm sick hearing about their kids doing so well because mine are on drugs right now, and I just can't tell you that because they'll make me look like a bad parent. And I'm sick of hearing about your money situation because again, like I don't want to tell you that we're broke or we're paying paycheck to paycheck because it'll make me look like a bad financial manager. But instead, what do they say to us? Like, show us more pictures of your beautiful family trip. Gather around, everyone. Gather around. Look at the perfect sickly family we have before us because we pay their paycheck or we influence their future. Now, is there anything wrong with boats or cars or trips? Heck no. I mean, listen, every one of your listeners that's a business owner is taking risk every day. That's not the normal path. The safe path is probably, and I don't even know if I agree with this statement. The safe path is maybe sometimes working for others, but I will say this, that I have a joke. When you have your own business, you sleep like a baby. You sleep 2 hours, wake up crying, sleep 2 hours, wake up crying, sleep 2 hours, because there's just a lot of pressure to be right all the time. And so I think that when you have a leader that's willing to take that risk, when you have a leader that they also have to be self-aware and understand that CEO disease exists. So I'm at an event, I won't say where or who, but this CEO raised his hand. He's like, so I shouldn't have called the whole office down to see my new Maserati in the parking lot the other day. I'm like, probably not. And I think he really did self-reflect and say, okay, that was not a smart move. He was just so excited, but there's no excuse. I mean, that's just not going to help anyone. It was not a good move. And so you do hear some of these stories and you can't think that that's actually real, but sometimes it is. And that those are classic, over the top moments of us not thinking, us not relating, us not being that leader that we need to be.
But I think it also does speak to how being the leader can be lonely, right? You want to be vulnerable with those around you, but there's some things you probably don't want to share. Right. And that's why you talk about the kitchen cabinet.
Yeah.
and why that is so important and critical for any leader. So talk about that.
Well, Sean, I know you're involved with Tech and Tech Canada and Vistage. There's other groups, Vistage, Vistage, YPO, EO. The reason why those CEO groups are successful is because it's maybe one of the only spots you can be vulnerable, where you can really lay it on the line and say, hey, I'm struggling with my family, or I'm struggling with my company, or I'm struggling with sales, or whatever that specific thing is, and actually have discussions about it. So it is a lonely world out there sometimes, because again, like, how honest can you really be sometimes with those employees? Because eventually self-preservation kicks in, like, should I be helping this person or looking for a new job? Like,
Yeah.
so there's, and even with the family, it's funny because I've had people tell me the story, stories over the years. They're like talking to their family, and the spouse like, we're still going to Aspen for Christmas, right? Yeah, everything's fine, So there's even like, how really honest can we be there? And believe me, I'm encouraging your listeners to be honest, to be forthright in all of these conversations. But there's a risk to that, and I think people realize that. So then they may choose not to talk about it or to let it fester, and then that's where the danger comes in. Because what you really need is and it goes back to that kitchen cabinet you brought up. It's one of the things that I talked about. I was fortunate to work for President Reagan in his post-presidential office, and President Reagan had what he affectionately called in his life a kitchen cabinet, a group of trusted friends, advisors, and they offered each other three things: brutal honesty, shared vision, and they were success oriented. But really in that group, you could be vulnerable. You know what I mean? You could be candid, and then you can seek advice. And that's why it was so powerful. So in my own life, I've had a kitchen cabinet, a group of trusted friends, advisors. I don't make major decisions without talking to them. And I really would want to say this to your listeners right now, like, who has your ear? Like, your success depends on it. Like, who are you talking to about, on these matters? Like, who can you get information from that's reliable, that's candid? And if you don't have a list of 5 or 6 names that, right away, you may want to try to work to expand that kitchen cabinet. Like, look outside your norm so that you can get diversity of thought, so that you can get somebody that's going to call you out. And there's power in that.
We'll get back to the Mind Your Farm Business podcast, but first a word from our sponsor, RBC Royal Bank.
This episode of Mind Your Farm Business podcast is brought to you by RBC. Maybe you've had an idea about upgrading your operation, or finally getting that renovation done, or buying some new equipment. Or you want to be a little less reliant on the weather from season to season. Get some help making it happen by speaking with an RBC Agriculture account manager. Then, set up an investment plan to make even more of your ideas happen. Visit rbc.com/chartyourcourse and get started today.
But a kit, like, and you hit on this, candid and honest. A kitchen cabinet, 3 or 4 or 5 people that just say, great idea, dude, you're killing, and they're not honest back. That can be like torturously terrible, like a detriment to your business and yourself.
Well, and that's what happens a lot to a CEO. So imagine you're a CEO and you're going to your employees all the time, because that's where we spend most of our time, employees and family, right? We're home or we're at work typically. A lot of those people, there's danger in telling you that you're wrong all the time, because eventually somebody may say, hey, well, maybe you don't believe in me. Maybe you shouldn't be here. So then you do get a lot of the, you're right. Another great idea, Dan, and you look great today. Have you been working out? You're like, oh, you have such great vision and you're so astute, and so you do want the candid, you need it. You have to have it. It's not even a question. And it's not easy sometimes. It hurts. It hurts to hear the truth sometimes, but it is 100% absolutely necessary. And again, for your listeners, I just encourage you, like, seek the truth, like, seek it out, and make it a safe space to be able to bring you that truth. It's why I like the statement, when I talk about CEO disease, I talk about, I'm like, how do you even know you have it? And you know how I say my secret sauce? I get feedback on a regular basis, one-on-one, never in groups of 2 or more, because they'll gang up on you. But I'll call in somebody and be like, hey, John, so look, I want to be the next best version of myself. I value your opinion. What should I do more of, less of, add? And then I just shut up and I listen. And in a twisted way, some people will take great pride in telling me. Some won't. Some will be like, Dan, you're just handsome and strong, the strongest man I've ever met. And I'm like, okay, whatever, But some will actually tell me the truth, like, Dan, quit talking about your daughter's volleyball all the time, or quit talking about your kids all the time, or quit talking about your trips all the time, or whatever that is. But man, that feedback, it is like gold. It really is. And if you have that attitude, in life about feedback like that, even though it may, cut and hurt at the time. I mean, I just think it's so powerful to help you achieve that next best version of you.
One of the challenges that farmers and ranchers that are family business structured typically, there's not a defined line. Like if you compare it to the corporate world, before maybe the pandemic and hybrid work environment, you commuted to work to the office, and then you commuted back home, and there was like a separation between work and home life. For a lot of people that are working in agriculture, there is a much blurred line there. A lot live where their company resides, like on the ranch or on the farm. Multiple family members, husband, wife, parents, kids, all working together. This is all really blurred. So that can be a real challenge from a leadership perspective with the business and with family.
Yeah. And you so absolutely right, of course. I mean, come on, when you're stepping from the outside back to the inside and it's a 1 or 2 minute transition, hard to kind of completely transition. And there are some things that I talk about when I talk about family business. I do a lot of consulting with companies. And what's interesting is I always say there needs to be a dividing line, not two different people. I'm not saying two different people. I'm just saying a dividing line where maybe and I encourage this, like something that I actually do sometimes where I have a spot near my home where I pull over and I'll set an alarm for 5 minutes. I'll put on some good music, and then I'll have a talk with myself. And the talk goes like this. It says, these problems, these stresses are not their problems. They don't have to be berated all night because of it. They don't even really have to hear about it all the time. I'm not saying don't talk about business or, withhold things. I'm just saying not all night, not all day. And certainly not with that, frustration or whatever. So now once I can release that, I can actually just walk in the house and be a dad, be a husband, you know what I mean? And be happy and maybe even be present, like be in the moment. And so I just challenge, your listeners to really kind of set that dividing time. It does, the neat thing about Reagan, when I worked for President Reagan, was there were no two Reagans. I really do believe that. Like who you saw was who you saw. Like that was the person. It wasn't one in front of the camera at work and then one when you walked in the home. Like, no, I got to see him in so many different environments. And I appreciate the fact that there were not two Reagans. Like he was kind of just a nice guy wherever he went. And so, yes, there were challenges all day. Or can you imagine? I mean, the challenges that you go through in that position, but then just transfer those challenges to like whether you're on a farm or whether you're in a tech company or whether, wherever you are in your life, like, are you the nice person at work and the monster at home? Mm. Well, no one wants to live with a monster. No one wants to work with a monster. So when I talk in my speeches, sometimes like, are you the monster? And if you could look at the faces, I see the faces. There's some monsters in that room and they know it. Now, the good news is they're there because they want to change, and it can change today, like right now. I mean, I always say, like, just treat people like your best clients. You would never talk to them that tone of voice. You would never chastise them all evening. You know what I mean? And so it is an interesting perspective. Like they could cheat on you with a competitor and never call us back. We'd still be standing at the door going, we love you, ready to do business whenever you are. We go home, one thing goes wrong, the beast has been unleashed. And so I just, again, challenge people listening to not have two of you, to be consistent, but also to set aside that time to like divide the time to say, hey, these problems are not their problems, and go home and actually just get to be present, like be an impact, a player in your family, in your business, in your community.
You mentioned be present. And in today's world of multitasking and maybe some of the misunderstandings about how the effectiveness of multitasking, being present seems to be a real challenge for a lot of people. And I always find like, you're having a meeting, whether it's face to face or maybe it's over a Zoom call. There's always that person's talking, but they're not really actually listening. Like they're somewhere else. People can tell, and it impacts relationships.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And a matter of fact, so in my presentations, I talk about the myth of work-life balance. I mean, I think work-life balance is a lie perpetrated on human beings to make them feel guilty about their lives, because it's impossible. I mean, let's just think about that for a second. I mean, we sleep. There's 24 hours in a day. We sleep, we work. By the time that happens, what's left? I mean, maybe 3 hours in the evening. I mean, maybe an hour in the morning to see the kids. I'm just saying that's 4 hours out of 24. You're always going to be losing in that situation. So I switched years ago, and I encourage your listeners to do the same. I switched to something that saved me, actually. I call it work-life presence. Like, I want to be where I am and I want to be there fully. So if they have 2 hours, it's going to be the best 2 hours of their entire life, because down's going to go to the cell phone. The conference calls can wait, and actually in real conversations where you actually listen and follow up. Remember those, like, hey kids, how's school? Listen, listen, listen. Like, who's your favorite teacher? Why? Listen, respond. What's your favorite subject? What's your favorite sport? And then turning to the other person in the house. Remember them? I mean, they may or may not even be there anymore. Who knows, right? And hey, honey, how you doing? You even happy? Like, what do you want out of life? Like, how can we, connect? Whatever happened to that date night we promised each other 20 years ago? That never happened. Sure, never missed a meeting at work, made sure those were a priority, just not this. I think that if you are willing to be present for even an hour, 2 hours in the evening, like really present, that's probably more than what most people do full time in a week. Because we always have the phone here. I mean, look, I'm sitting here talking to you. My phone is sitting right here beneath me, right? Just waiting to be checked, waiting to jump on, see if I have an email or a voicemail or social media. I mean, that's just a reality. I mean, there's a great statistic. So 20 years ago, we had a 20-minute attention span. Today, according to Google, are you ready? 8 seconds.
Oh, goodness.
8 seconds. Why do you think these reels are getting shorter? And you think it's going to get any better? No, it's going to get even shorter. Not kidding. Google changed that about a year ago from 9 seconds to 8 seconds. They adjusted it 1 second a year ago. So you have 8 seconds to be interesting, magnetic, so people don't swipe by you, swipe by your story. So we're living in this world. You have to play in that world. But man, when you have the time, and time is probably the most valuable asset to me, use it wisely. Like, stay focused, stay present.
Yeah, when we're talking about attention spans that low, boy, no wonder there's no one pays any attention to any nuance. That's crazy.
Yeah, no, it's true. And so, it's funny, I created that the Quiggle assessment, right? Because I didn't want people swiping by my kids, swiping by my salespeople, swiping by my story, and but it's based on that science. How do you come up with a compelling success slogan and story for what you deliver, what you create, what you inspire, what you teach, and then be able to articulate it.
You mentioned former President Reagan several times. You did work next to him post presidency. You mentioned some of the things, observations about him. Talk about that a little bit more in terms of some of the leadership principles that you learned from the former president.
Yeah, I think that. So first of all, I kind of already said one, which was there were no two Reagans. Like, he was consistent in his leadership and his personality and the way he led. But I think that Reagan was a visionary leader. I mean, I really do believe that. So he created a vision compelling for the American people and maybe perhaps, around the world for a lot of people. But, he kind of focused in on a few things. Like, it was kind of defeat communism and fix the economy. Anything else was a distraction. So it's like, what about this distraction? You'd be like, does it help the economy or defeat communism? All right, next question. So I think there were some lessons there of trying to stay focused as much as possible on, the 2 or 3 things that you want to achieve in your lifetime. But also, President Reagan had not just that kitchen cabinet we talked about, but he also had these traits that I saw in him, like this attitude of gratitude. Like, he was a deflector. In other words, Mr. President, you're such a great communicator. He would say, oh, I'm just fortunate to communicate great things. Mr. President, you did such a great job in that. Have you seen my staff? I mean, when someone does that, like, if I'm part of the staff, like, I'm the low man on the totem pole in this office, like, I'm around so many heavy hitters, like, I idolize these people. They all came from the White House, you know what I mean? So here for me as a staff member to hear that, what did it make me want to do? More. Yeah. Even better. Because I felt value, I felt recognition, I felt all these things, and he would always thank people. I mean, if you don't mind, can I share one of my favorite Reagan stories?
Absolutely.
So President Reagan, I'm sitting up in the office one day, the phone rings, it's the president, and you never get used to that. And he goes, Dan, could you do me a favor? Could you go to the gift closet, grab some gifts, and meet me down at the car? And I'm not going to question the president, like, what are they for? Who are they for? No, I'm literally just going to do it. So there was a closet with hundreds of tie tacks, cufflinks, bronze eagles, the presidential seal, his signature engraved in gold on the back. I mean, really neat stuff you can't buy in any store, beautifully wrapped, of course. So I grab a handful, I go down the garage. What I didn't realize was in the garage, there was a guy from Mexico. He didn't speak a lot of English. He wore top hat, tails, dress shoes. There's a beautiful building, so he dressed the part. And that guy would run every day in top hat, tails, dress shoes to the outskirts of that garage, like 2 football fields away. And he would salute the motorcade every day when it would come in. He'd run back as the motorcade would circle around through the garage to that door. He'd bought his own American flag, and he would stand and hold the door open for the president every morning and hold the American flag. Well, classic leadership, President Reagan recognizes this guy's going above and beyond, isn't he? This is not in his job description. So I'll never forget, I meet the president in the car. He's hiding. Like, I have no idea what's about to happen. We're in the garage. There's no one around. So I'm like, what is happening? And I hand him the gifts. Well, he starts walking toward the door, and you have to picture the scene because the guy's trying to, or, there's 3 Secret Service agents, myself and the president, and the guy's trying to hold the flag. He stops. The guy starts shaking. You know what I mean? And President Reagan looks at him and he goes, every day I come through this door, and every day you make me so proud to be an American. The way you stand there with that flag, the pride you take in your job. I know it's not much, but I want to give you a few tokens of my appreciation for what you do every day, which is make my day. And he goes to hand the guy the gifts. Well, the guy's trying to hold the flag, hold the door, grab the gift, shake hands. He can't do it all. So one Secret Service agent jumps in to hold the flag. The other one jumps in to hold the door. And I'm standing there going I love you, man. You are such a good person, such a good leader. And my takeaway from that, Sean, was this wasn't a publicity stunt. There was no one else there. No cameras, no reporters. He never turned to me and said, will you document this or tell what you've seen here today? He did it all the time. And so imagine me at my age getting to see that apparently this is what real leadership looks like. It's not about demanding or demeaning or demoralizing. It's about inspiring and motivating and appreciating. And how much does that cost us? Yeah. Nothing. Just the emotional intelligence to understand it matters to people. They want to be recognized. Your spouse wants to be recognized. Kids, teachers that made an impact in your life, all these moments of time where I challenge people and I challenge your listeners, right now, take out a sheet of paper, write down 2 names personally and 2 names professionally that you want to thank today in your life. Those calls, they may need to hear from you. They may be struggling right now. They may, thinking that their life had not as much meaning as they thought, or they didn't have as much impact. And all of a sudden you call up and say, hey, you're the one, you're the one. Thank you. You were the greatest teacher I ever had. You impacted me. You inspired me. Or mom, dad, you're the one. I mean, do you know how powerful that is? Can you imagine getting a call from an adult parent, an adult child saying, you're the one that, you're the greatest parent. I just want to thank you for my life, for all the things you've done for me. That's a deathbed smile call, Sean. I'm on my last moment going, I got that call. You know what I mean? So I just think that Reagan, through attitude of gratitude, through kitchen cabinet, through emotional intelligence, through the fact that there were no 2 Reagans, you start to see a pattern of authenticity.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Of just somebody who cares for others and who is a servant leader and yet, willing to stand strong for what they believe in. And when you put all of those things together, whether you are just doing it as a parent, whether you're doing it, running your family farm, whether it's a tech company or a multi-billion-dollar, corporation, you're going to be successful.
That story, I think, comes full circle, though, in the sense that, yes, cameras weren't rolling. It wasn't on the nightly news that he had done this to, and get recognition for it. But you were watching, and it had a great impact on you. And so at the end of the day, think about the chain reaction of you observing that and really it defining, what actions does a leader take. It's had like a mushroom effect. Yeah. As you start to talk to crowds and talk about some of the things that you talk about. The impact, the cameras didn't have to be there because at the end of the day, it had mass impact.
Yeah, but it was him just doing what he did all the time. That's the beauty of it. And Sean, you're exactly right. Let me make this clear. Someone's always watching. Your kids are listening to everything you say. You know what I mean? They're listening to the conversation when you're on the phone. They're listening to the terms you use. Are you cursing all the time? All these different things. They hear everything. But your employees are also listening. You think when you stop at an office and you're having a one-on-one conversation with somebody that every ear within 50 feet of that conversation is not zoomed in wondering, are they getting praise when I should be getting praise? Are they getting in trouble? Oh, I hope they're getting in trouble. I mean, they're humans, right? Well, they're just, it's why these shows in the afternoon do so well, right? About, human misery and all these different struggles, because people want to wallow in somebody else's pain and know that they're not the only one struggling, but in the end, you decide like how you're going to show up each day. That creates that ripple effect you were talking about. And when you lead and people admire you, they'll emulate you. And so what ripple effect are you creating? In your family, in your business, on that farm, for everyone working around you, because they're watching and they're listening.
Dan, this has been fantastic. At some point, we got to have you back. We just keep on rolling here. I love your energy, your insight, and really appreciate you joining us here today on the Mind Your Farm Business podcast. All the best to you, and look forward to our next chat.
Sean, I look forward to it. Thank you for having me on.
We try to emulate the best traits for leaders we look up to or who we have witnessed firsthand. As Dan Quiggle talks about, we are striving every day to be the best version of ourselves, and even the best, most well-known leaders, they're just, quite frankly, not perfect. As farm leaders, many of you have to apply different leadership styles at work and at home, and as Dan talks about, this is entirely normal. It's also a challenge that I know you're up to in your leadership journey. If there is anything that Dan says which has you asking more questions or have an opinion on, don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email address is shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the Real Ag feedback line 855-776-6147. You can find more episodes of this podcast by going to mindyourfarmbusiness.com. Thanks to RBC Royal Bank for being the sponsor of Mind Your Farm Business. And until next time, keep on minding your farm business.